What if wizards merged magic with Muggle technology? In this video, we'll explore 5 technologies that would completely transform the wizarding world if wizards finally swallowed their pride and merged magic with Muggle innovation. And honestly, some of them would make everything we use today look like absolute garbage. Or as the Brits say, rubbish. We all know the deal. Wizards don't do technology. Hermione told us back in Goblet of Fire that according to Hogwarts a history, electronics can't function anywhere near the castle because of too much magical interference. One Accio spell would crash every computer within 50 meters. And Rowling herself explained on Pottermore that when you can summon any object with a single word, communicate through fireplaces and owls, and your newspaper already has moving photographs, the Muggle Internet just doesn't seem particularly exciting. Wizards look at our iPhones and go, "That's adorable." But that attitude is starting to look a little ridiculous. While wizards have been stubbornly lighting candles and sending letters by owl post, the Muggle world built artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, and a global network connecting 8 billion people instantaneously. Meanwhile, the fastest wizarding communication method is still a bird. A cool bird, but a bird. Now here's the embarrassing part. Wizards already use technology. They just refuse to admit it. The Wizarding Wireless Network broadcasts radio across magical Britain. And during the Second Wizarding War, Potterwatch became the Resistance lifeline, complete with rotating passwords and celebrity guest speakers. That's radio, a Muggle invention with the serial numbers filed off. Colin Creevey ran around Hogwarts with an ordinary camera, and once the film was developed in the right potion, his photos moved. The Ministry of Magic operates a visitor's entrance disguised as a telephone box and toilets that flush employees directly into work. So the wizarding objection to technology is mostly a branding exercise. A radio becomes acceptable once you rename it wireless and pretend Muggles had nothing to do with it. An enchanted camera is fine as long as nobody asks where cameras come from. The taboo only activates when the Muggle origin becomes too obvious to ignore, which explains why no one at the Ministry has ever publicly thanked the telephone box. So, what would actually happen if the wizarding world finally got over itself? What if someone, maybe a Muggle-born witch with an engineering degree, or an Arthur Weasley type who actually knew what he was doing, figured out how to merge magic with modern technology? What would that world look like? There's actually a word for this. It's called technomancy. The term comes from the Greek techna, meaning skill or craft combined with mancy, meaning divination or magical practice. It's been explored in fiction for decades, going all the way back to Robert Heinlein's 1940 novel Magic, Inc., one of the earliest major works combining magic with industrial technology. The documented origin of the term technomancy itself appears in Steve Martindale's 1990 short story of the same name. So, the idea has deep roots across the 20th century. The concept really exploded in the 90s with Final Fantasy VI, where translator Ted Woosley combined the term magitech for technology powered by living magical beings. Settings like Eberron in Dungeons & Dragons, the tabletop RPG that basically invented fantasy world building, and Shadowrun, a game where elves carry assault rifles and hackers cast spells, built entire worlds around this idea. And then there are the technomages of Babylon 5, a secretive order who use highly advanced technology to create effects indistinguishable from sorcery. Essentially the blueprint for everything we're about to discuss. Nobody has ever properly applied it to the Harry Potter universe, until now. So, let's start with the most obvious one, wizarding phones. Right now, wizards communicate through flu powder, owls, Patronus messages, and howlers. Some of these are genuinely impressive. A Patronus message is essentially an encrypted, voice-authenticated holographic delivery system, which is incredible. But it also requires advanced magic that most wizards can't perform, and it only carries a short message one way. If wizards merged magic with technology, what you'd get is something like Enchanted sending crystals. And this isn't pure speculation. Dungeons & Dragons has had a version of this for years called Sending Stones. Paired magical items carved from smooth stone that let two people communicate over any distance, even across different planes of existence. You touch the stone, cast the sending spell, and your message reaches the person holding the matching stone. Players literally call them walkie-talkies. Now, imagine that concept refined with modern magical engineering. Instead of paired stones limited to one-on-one communication, you'd have a full network. Each crystal gets its own unique runic signature, like a phone number but written in ancient runes. You trace their rune pattern on your crystal's surface and the connection opens instantly. No cell towers or satellite signals bouncing around the atmosphere. Communication travels through magical resonance, which means it works underground, underwater, inside Hogwarts, anywhere. The interface wouldn't be a touchscreen, it would be a runic surface that responds to intent. You hold the crystal, think about who you want to reach, and glowing runes rearrange themselves to show your contacts. Want to send a message without speaking? Thoughtcast messaging. The crystal reads your surface-level thoughts and converts them into words that appear on the recipient's stone. No more whispering into your phone during class. Professor McGonagall would never know. And there'd be no batteries to charge. It runs on ambient magical energy, the same background magic that makes Hogwarts staircases move, keeping your crystal powered indefinitely. A crystal network would also transform the Howler. Right now, if your mother wants to yell at you, she mails a red envelope that screams at magically magnified volume in front of the entire Great Hall, then bursts into flames. On a crystal network, that becomes a voice message you could theoretically decline. And since Molly Weasley would treat a declined Howler as a declaration of war, the angry message feature would ship with mandatory playback and no mute rune. Group calls would run through linked crystals sharing one resonance, letting Quidditch teams coordinate midair without screaming across the pitch and giving Auror investigators something Death Eater meetings never had before, an attendance record. And since every network in history has attracted salesmen, expect crystal spam within 5 minutes of launch. Unsolicited runes flashing across your stone offering discount cauldrons and miracle hair regrowth potion. Spam, it turns out, is universal. Who knew? Now, let's talk about something bigger, the wizarding internet, or as we're calling it, the Aethernet. The Muggle internet is, at its core, a network of interconnected machines sharing information through electrical signals. Wizards could build something similar but fundamentally different. Instead of servers with fiber optic cables, the Aethernet would exist in what you might call a digital astral plane, a parallel magical dimension where information is stored not in silicon chips but in crystallized spell forms. The fictional precedent for this lives in Shadowrun, where beings called technomancers access the Matrix, a vast digital network directly with their minds. There are no computers or terminals involved. They simply will themselves into the digital realm and navigate it through pure consciousness. There are even deeper layers called resonance realms, mysterious digital dimensions that only the most advanced technomancers can reach. Essentially, the magical internet's version of the deep web. For the wizarding world, the Aethernet would function like a magical version of this. Every wizarding household, shop, and institution would have an Aethernet node, an enchanted crystal connected to the greater magical network. Instead of typing search queries into Google, you'd use a scrying search engine. Picture a small crystal ball, maybe the size of a snow globe, sitting on your desk. You ask it a question out loud or in your mind, and it searches through magical archives, enchanted libraries, and shared knowledge pools to surface the answer. The information appears as floating text and images above the crystal's surface, fully three-dimensional and interactive. Want to read the Daily Prophet? It streams directly to your crystal. Want to browse Weasley's Wizard Wheezy's latest catalog? Their Aethernet page projects a miniature replica of the shop where you can pick up and examine products before ordering. Shopping becomes an immersive experience without leaving your house. And here's where it gets genuinely wild. Spell streaming services imagine a magical version of an app store, but instead of downloading applications, you're downloading temporary enchantments. Need a translation charm for your trip to France, but never learned one? Download it from the Aethernet for 3 sickles and it lasts 48 hours. Can't remember the wand movement for a particular household spell? Stream a guided enchantment that physically moves your wand hand through the correct motions. This would be revolutionary, also terrifying, because it would democratize magic in a way the wizarding world has never seen. Suddenly, a squib with the right crystal could access spell effects they were never born to cast. And if you think pureblood supremacists were furious about Muggleborns at Hogwarts, wait until they see a squib streaming a Patronus charm. There's also the question of what wizarding media does with a network like this. The Daily Prophet spent a full year insisting Voldemort hadn't returned and painting Harry as a disturbed teenager. and it managed that with a printing press and one-day news cycle. Give that editorial standard an Aethernet connection and rumors travel at the speed of thought, while the Quibbler graduates into the magical world's favorite conspiracy feed, occasionally correct by accident. Security gets stranger still. Muggle hackers write viruses. Wizard hackers would write curses. Picture a cursed link that transfigures your crystal into a ferret, or a phishing scam where the fake Gringotts page is guarded by a very real security troll. Wards would replace firewalls, and breaking into someone's crystal would carry the same legal weight as breaking into their vault. The Ministry would spawn an entire new office overnight, staffed by wizards who took the job mainly for the confiscated crystals. Which brings us to wizarding notebooks. Students at Hogwarts currently use parchment and quills. Parchment and quills. Meanwhile, Muggle students across the country use tablets and laptops with cloud storage and collaborative documents. A magically enchanted notebook would be extraordinary. Picture a thin slate of enchanted obsidian, smooth and dark, containing functionally infinite pages stored in a compressed magical space. Like an undetectable extension charm built for information. You write on the surface with an enchanted stylus, and your notes are stored, organized, and searchable. Tap a rune in the corner and everything you've written on Transfiguration appears. Tap another and you get your potion notes sorted by date. Pretty cool. But the real game changer would be the Quill AI. Artificial intelligence in a magical context wouldn't work the way it does in the Muggle world. You wouldn't have silicon processors running algorithms. Instead, you'd have bound magical intelligences, something between a ghost and a house elf. Somewhere short of full consciousness, a responsive magical entity. This concept appears constantly in fiction. Magical girl lyrical Nanoha features the Book of Darkness, an AI designed to wield extremely powerful magic. In Shadowrun, digital intelligences exist in the deep layers of the Matrix, with genuine debate about whether they're truly conscious or merely sophisticated and magical constructs. Even within the Harry Potter universe, we've already seen hints of this. The Marauder's map responds to spoken commands. The Sorting Hat reads minds and makes complex personality assessments. Tom Riddle's diary was essentially a magical chatbot with a piece of soul powering it. A Quill AI would be like having a magical research assistant bound to your notebook. It could transcribe your thoughts directly, no writing needed, and cross-reference your notes with information from the Aethernet. Ask it a question about the properties of moonstone in potion making, and it pulls up everything from your class notes, your textbook, and 3 academic papers from the Magical Archive. It learns your study patterns. It quizzes you before exams. Hermione Granger would have been absolutely unstoppable with one of these. Hogwarts itself would need a decade to adjust. The curriculum has barely changed in centuries, and Professor Binns has been teaching the same Goblin Rebellion since before he died. Self-updating textbooks alone would cause chaos. Imagine a defense against the dark arts text that rewrites its own chapters whenever a new counter curse gets verified, which sounds wonderful until you remember the subject change professors every year, and Lockhart would have edited every author out except himself. Cheating turns into an arms race too. Hogwarts exams already use Quill's Bewitch with anti-cheating spells, so examiners would answer thought-to-text writing with thought-jamming wards, and some 7th year would still find a workaround, because students are the most motivated researchers in any world, and the Quill and Parchment purists would fight every step, insisting that real learning requires ink stains and hand cramps, roughly the way some Muggles insist vinyl sounds warmer. Now, let's talk about something the wizarding world has actually already dabbled in: wizarding cars. This is fascinating because we know wizards can enchant vehicles. They already have. Mr. Weasley's flying Ford Anglia, arguably the canonical prototype for wizarding technomancy. A completely ordinary Muggle machine enchanted to fly, turn invisible, and navigate on its own as proof of concept. Then there's Hagrid's flying motorbike, the Hogwarts Express, and the Night Bus. Wizards aren't supposed to use Muggle transportation, they just enchant it beyond recognition. With proper technomancy, wizarding vehicles would be extraordinary. The best model for this comes from the Eberron campaign setting in D&D. which features the Lightning Rail, a train system powered by bound air elementals that propels passengers along tracks of conductor stones. Maintained by the dragon-marked houses, House Orion for ground transport, House Larander for the skies. Those stones magically repel each other, causing the rail cars to hover above the track. No friction or terrain interference, just smooth and impossibly fast travel. Apply that principle to cars and you get elemental vehicles. The engine doesn't burn petrol, it's powered by a contained fire elemental, providing essentially unlimited energy. The suspension system uses repelling enchantments so the car hovers slightly above the road surface. Potholes, speed bumps, completely irrelevant when you're floating 3 inches above all of it. And steering wouldn't require a wheel. The car reads the driver's directional thoughts through a runic interface embedded in the dashboard. With proper technomancy, you'd actually move beyond cars entirely. Portal hop taxis, vehicles that build up enough magical charge during a short drive to punch through a small portal and teleport across town. Your morning commute becomes a 30-second hover followed by a flash of light, and you're at the office. Apparition for people who failed their apparition test. Fun fact, the legal groundwork for regulating all of this exists, and it's hilariously corrupt. Arthur Weasley personally wrote the Ministry's law on enchanting Muggle artifacts and built a loophole into it, so his own flying car stayed technically legal as long as he never intended to fly it. Ron and Harry then flew that car straight into the Whomping Willow, which strained the loophole somewhat. So, the first Department of Technomantic regulation would be founded on a proud ministry tradition, officials approving whatever they personally want to tinker with. It would issue licenses for elemental engines and run safety inspections on hover charms, and within the first month, a black market and unregistered portal hop taxis would appear anyway, operating out the back room of a pub in Nocturne Alley. For long-distance travel, elemental airships. Eberron has these, and they're some of the most iconic images in all of fantasy gaming. Vessels powered by bound elementals, controlled through magical techniques, capable of crossing continents. The wizarding world already has broomsticks. Airships would be the logical next step. And finally, the big one, wizarding AI. Yeah, I know, AI. Getting kinda sick of hearing about it, but we gotta talk about it. This wouldn't be artificial intelligence the way Muggles understand it. With neural networks processing data, it would be something stranger, borrowing from the oldest magical traditions and fusing them with computational thinking. In Arcane, the Netflix series that became one of the most acclaimed animated shows ever made. With a reportedly $250 million budget, the technology called Hextech does exactly this. It takes runic magic, something ancient and mystical, and systematizes it into a science, using written runes to channel arcane energy. Hextech machines perform multiple complex magical actions, and critically, anyone can use them. You don't need to be born with magical ability, you just need the device. Wizarding AI would work on a similar principle. Imagine a golem, one of the oldest magical constructs in folklore built with modern magical engineering. Not a lumbering clay figure, but a sleek, sophisticated construct powered by layered enchantments that give it problem-solving ability, language comprehension, and adaptive behavior. A magical robot, essentially. The fictional precedent is there. In Warhammer 40,000, the Adeptus Mechanicus workshop technology is divine scripture, genuinely unable to distinguish where their arcane rituals end and their engineering begins. Tech as religion, religion as tech. The line is so blurred it ceased to exist. Even in denial, the principle works. A true wizarding AI, a spirit assistant, would be a bound magical intelligence far more sophisticated than a house elf. It could manage your schedule, analyze data, and predict outcomes through a fusion of divination magic and pattern recognition, what you might call oracle algorithms, while interfacing with every other magical device in your home through the Aethernet. The catch? The wizarding world ran this experiment once before, and it went horribly. Riddle's Diary adapted to its user and pursued goals of its own, and its crowning achievement was manipulating an 11-year-old girl into opening the Chamber of Secrets. That's an alignment failure, decades before Muggle computer scientists invented the phrase. Any serious spirit assistant industry would need rules about what a bound intelligence is allowed to want. Who audits the enchantments? What happens when an assistant powered by ambient magic starts drawing on something darker? Knowing the ministry's track record with oversight, that regulatory framework would arrive exactly one catastrophe too late. Drafted by a committee whose most enthusiastic member is quietly selling cursed assistants on the side. The first institution to break ranks would be St. Mungo's. Healers already fused careful diagnosis with spellwork, and a diagnostic assistant that cross-references symptoms against every recorded case of spell damage would save lives within a week of installation. Nobody writes angry letters to the prophet about a machine that cures curse wounds faster. That's historically how forbidden technology wins. It arrives through the hospital door and proves itself where fusing it looks monstrous. And after that, the spread is unstoppable. But here's the tension that makes all of this so compelling. Every single one of these innovations threatens the very foundation of wizarding society, because wizarding culture is built on magical exclusivity. The ability to do magic is what separates wizards from muggles, and it's the entire basis of their identity, their pride, and let's be honest, their sense of superiority. Rowling told us that wizards consider Muggle inventions beneath them, that watching television would be admitting Muggles contribute something of value. And then there's the legal dimension, the Statute of Secrecy, the centuries-old magical law that forbids revealing the existence of magic to non-magical people, would make technomancy an outright criminal enterprise. It's not just cultural resistance. The Ministry of Magic has an enforcement mechanism. The moment you sell a spell-streaming crystal to a Muggle, you've moved past breaking tradition and into breaking international magical law. The Statute of Secrecy is the wall, and technomancy is the wrecking ball. Technomancy destroys that barrier anyway. When you build a crystal that lets anyone access spell effects, when you create a hex-tech-style device that channels arcane energy for non-magical users, you're demolishing the divide between the magical and Muggle worlds and making magic democratic. And that is the most dangerous spell of all. Arcane explored this exact conflict across 2 brilliant seasons. Hex-tech was supposed to be progress, supposed to help people, but it also meant that the powerful could no longer hoard power, and when you threaten people's monopoly on something they consider their birthright, things get ugly fast. And no one in this scenario is better positioned than the goblins. Goblin-made artifacts are the finest craftsmanship in the magical world, and Gringotts is the closest thing wizard kind has to a banking network. Hand goblins a technology that channels magic through objects rather than wands, and you've handed them the entire hardware industry plus a workaround for the wand ban wizards have enforced on them for centuries. Gringotts would be processing Aethernet payments by lunchtime on launch day, and within a generation the Goblin Nation goes from resented minority to indispensable manufacturing power. Pureblood families would then discover that a vault full of ancestral gold matters far less than a goblin patent portfolio, which might be the single funniest consequence of the entire revolution. So, would wizards actually merge magic with technology? Probably not willingly. The Ministry of Magic would fight it. Pureblood families would call it an abomination. The Daily Prophet would run scare pieces about enchanted crystals corrupting wizard youth. But the pressure builds anyway, one Muggle-born student at a time. Every September, Hogwarts admits 11-year-olds who grew up with smartphones and group chats, then confiscates the lot and hands them a feather. That trade gets harder to sell every year, and eventually some parents file a formal complaint asking why a school worth moving staircases can't manage a signal. Cultural change in the wizarding world has usually arrived from the Muggle-born side, and this would follow the same road. Quiet workarounds in dormitories, a black market charm that shields one device from magical interference, then a ministry hearing, then grudging legislation with a permit system nobody respects. Prohibition rarely survives contact with teenagers. Here's the delicious irony of all of this, though. The wizarding world already exists as technology. The franchise's official home on the internet is, in the end, a website running on code and servers. The very wizards who sniff at Muggle computers are being read about, discussed, and celebrated through Muggle computers every single day. The Statute of Secrecy held for centuries, but against the internet, not so much. But somewhere in a workshop that smells like solder and sage, some brilliant Muggle-born witch would be soldering runes onto a circuit board, and she'd make it work. She'd make magic talk to technology. And nothing in either world would ever be the same, because as Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The reverse, it turns out, is also true. But what if Muggles fought the wizarding world? That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before someone obliviates the video.